But I'll tell you, going back to your first question, I'll tell you one thing that did sort of get me a little bit annoyed was one of my current clients. Before he came to me, he believes he attributes some of his disordered eating patterns to one, I won't name his name, but one very famous coach online who said something along the lines of, I think it was, if you can't see your abs, you're fat, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this contributed to his disordered eating. And he's actually very angry about that now because he was a young, impressionable guy at the time. And it contributed to some disordered eating, him staying at a low body weight for far too long, and contributed to some poor eating habits. So he's pretty angry about that now. And I've got him on the right track. He's gaining some good weight, he's gaining some good strength, and that's all great. But I think he feels like he missed out on 6 months of giving himself a hard time unnecessarily for that. So I guess there are, this is it, Alex. Maybe it's a different conversation, but one of the things that people talk about all the time is giving advice and stuff. And I know you've got a separate channel for that, and I think that's cool. But like, I think when I was a school teacher, one of the first things that we were taught was you're in a position of authority. You have to be very careful with the advice that you give out because it can really have an impact on people. Like there's a level of responsibility if you're a person of authority. And I think giving people out like information like that, like the whole, if you don't have abs, you're fat kind of thing, potentially giving people advice about their lives and all that kind of stuff off the back of your personality or your achievements in sports, it's a very dangerous game. And I think it's all well and good saying, well, you're an adult, you can make your own decisions and everything. But these things have very real consequences. And one of the reasons I just don't give a lot of, actual social, like psychological advice and life advice on my channel is it scares the hell out of me, to be honest. It's a big responsibility. So I'm 40, so I've got plenty of life experience. I feel like I can divulge. But what if I put someone wrong? I mean, I'm not talking from a legality point of view because there's not really much comeback there, but what if I put someone in the wrong direction? They do something wrong, and how am I going to sleep with myself at night? It's a difficult thing, and I think people do that a lot. There's a lot out there now, which is, I'm this person on YouTube. I want to give you life advice, and it's fine for them. I'm not judging anyone, but it scares the hell out of me.
No, it is a big responsibility, and I find that when I do broach those topics and I try to do it right, whatever that means. You have to, if you're imagining some potentially vulnerable person sitting in front of you, you're talking to many of them, all with different issues, to try to cast such a wide net that it becomes meaningful to all of them. It kind of becomes meaningful to none of them. And you end up having to add so many qualifiers of what you're saying that you end up not really saying anything. So that really gets exaggerated when you have these channels that want to make not just a wide sweeping statement, but it's an absolutist statement, and it's blown up the way you blow things up when you want to get a lot of attention or add to your brand. And it can get really ugly. And the conversation has always interested me more than the dogma of like kind of pushing a perspective or point of view. But it is ugly business. And for every person that's out there looking for something to grab onto to give them a little bit of stability that might help them, there's the potential person that will misinterpret it, that will take it too far. The body dysmorphia thing is really hard in this field because, and especially you train bodybuilders, you deal with this day in, day out. The best man in my wedding, Tony Russell, he was a bodybuilder. He's done it for years. He grades women by how he thinks they would do if they tried to go pro. It's been a big part of his life. And he's the first one to say, he's like, bodybuilders aren't okay. He's like, you got to be a little bit off your rocker to do this stuff. And when you take that personality type and then you add a bunch of kind of superfluous arbitrary standards, it's a recipe for putting yourself in a bad spot. And we already have a society that has an unhealthy relationship with food, and we use it to self-medicate. And now you're adding these weird standards and I get irked. I mean, from that, like, yeah, it's dangerous, but then as just somebody who's trying to get people stronger, like you can't do that when people are trying to stay at 140 pounds, when they're grown adult men. And I deal with a lot of that trying to get people to gain weight is such a chore nowadays.
It is. There was something that you said on the podcast with Steve that I thought was really good. And it was, you said, when you're speaking on YouTube, you try and envision you speaking to a room full of your peers and how you would moderate yourself. And I thought that was really clever. It's fantastic. I love that. Because I often think the conversations we have online, which tend to get quite heated, I wonder if we could just displace everyone and put them into a pub with a pint. It would be a much friendlier discussion. So yeah, I really like that. I thought I wanted to point that out with today.
I think about stuff like that a lot. It's funny you bring that up. I forget what I was listening to, but it was somebody talking about, it was an Englishman, I believe, talking about, I think it was Pierce Morgan. I was listening to an interview with Pierce Morgan. He was on Bill Maher. And he was talking about growing up with a family that owned a pub. And they were talking about the cultural differences of drinking culture, which is like the great social lubricant. And it's what discussion is based off of. And he was talking about pubs as this, like, it's intergenerational, and it's a place where the community goes, and you'll have old timers and you'll have young people, and you'll have like people will grow up going to the same pub with the same people. And out here, it's very much, it's even segregated out here by, well, this is the nightclub, this is for young people, this is the hipster bar. It's like the old people go over here and it's kind of whack, you don't go over there. But it's that idea of trying to get people's conversations in one place. There's a cohesiveness to that I like, that is very much, I think, missing from most of our dialogue. Whether you want to talk about technical stuff related to lifting, whether you want to talk about mental health or social or political topics, that I think really does us a disservice from that perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I think a large part of it, people are just out of practice, and if the last few years has taught us anything, it's there's a lot of people who have developed sort of anxiety-like symptoms, but not full-blown anxiety. And I sympathize as that as an actual diagnosis. But a lot of people are more anxious in speaking to each other simply because they're just not used to doing it. So they've been indoors for 2 or 3 years, and it's like you're saying, if we were more able and more willing to just all be in one room and speak to each other and be forced to do that face to face in a civilized manner, it would probably lead to people adapting far better to being able to have a conversation with somebody else with a different viewpoint. Like on my Facebook, I quite like having people with different viewpoints. So it's quite nice. I have people with different political beliefs, religious beliefs. I have some with, some strange beliefs, because it's quite nice to have the interaction. I think it's good. I think you should always open yourself up to those, as long as it's done in a civilized way. But it's practice. If you can't practice doing that, you're always going to be sheltered. And then when you go online, you're not going to be able to deal with all these different opinions. You'll get angry, and it's very, very easy online just to beep and log off and have a nice day. Feel like you got the upper hand. But I think it's just a lack of practice.
No, that's absolutely right. And because internet and social media culture selects for those very polarized viewpoints, regardless of what the topic is, and all the anger and rage that comes with it, we almost end up taking that out into the real world, where I don't know if anybody else has experienced this. I find myself a little more hesitant to have kind of normal conversations with people, because there's almost this learned anticipation that things go off the rails if you get out of this this very tightly controlled path of conversation. And you do need practice. And I always recommend that people have some idea of what the other side believes, that it's indicative of something that you have intellectual respect for, as opposed to just having your worst kind of bad faith interpretation of what other people think. One of the reasons I made this new channel that I just created is so I could talk about a lot of different shit. On my main channel, I did a thing on testosterone in America. And of course, there were some social and political implications. And I had this long thread that was taken up. I guess I have like a lot of Marxists that follow me. I had a bunch of and they were, throwing their jargon around in the comments. And I am decidedly not a Marxist. I am an unabashed American capitalist. But we had this amazing conversation that I had to cut short because it was taking up too much of my day. But when it actually gets into the weeds and you get into it, you can find some really good things. Even if you don't come to an agreement, you don't have to. At least you have an understanding, and that's a big part of it. And then bringing that back to training culture, so much of it is finger wagging and people putting their dogmatic flag on this or that.